I sat at the kitchen table, the house so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. In my hand was our wedding photo, the one where Mark's smile lit up the room, where my white dress glowed under the summer sun. 20 years, 2 kids, a life we built brick by brick, and now it was gone. He was gone. My husband, the man I trusted with every piece of me, left me for his secretary. The word still burns in my throat, sharp like the coffee I let go cold in front of me. How do you even begin to process that kind of betrayal? How do you look at the life you thought was yours and realize it was all a lie? I found his note that morning, tucked under a magnet on the fridge like it was a reminder to buy milk. I'm leaving. I'm in love with Lisa. I'm sorry. That was it. No explanation, no goodbye, just those words, scribbled in his familiar handwriting, tearing my world apart. I read it over and over, my hands shaking, waiting for the words to rearrange into something that made sense. They didn't. Lisa, his secretary, the woman who'd been in our lives for 2 years, always there at company dinners, her laugh too loud, her perfume too strong. I trusted him. I trusted them. And now I was alone, staring at the wreckage of 20 years, wondering how I didn't see it coming. What do you do when the person you loved most, the one who promised forever, rips your heart out and walks away? Do you scream, cry, beg? I wanted to do all of it, but I just sat there, the silence swallowing me whole. My kids, Emily and Jake, were at school, oblivious to the bomb that had just gone off in our family. I couldn't even imagine telling them. How do you tell your daughter her hero isn't coming home? Like, how do you tell your son his dad chose someone else? But that wasn't even the worst of it. The real pain, the kind that cuts deeper than betrayal, came later when I found out the truth about Lisa. I thought I knew heartbreak. I thought I'd felt the worst of it. I was wrong. What I uncovered about Lisa changed everything, and it set me on a path I never expected. This isn't just a story of a marriage that broke. It's the story of what happened when I decided to fight back. The silence in the kitchen lingered after I read Mark's note, that scrap of paper still crumpled in my fist. I couldn't move, not yet. My mind kept drifting back, replaying our life like a movie I thought I knew the ending to. Mark and I met in college, 2 kids barely out of their teens, laughing over cheap coffee in a cramped campus cafe. He was ambitious, with big dreams of becoming a lawyer, and I was the artsy one, sketching designs in the margins of my notebooks. We fell hard and fast, the kind of love that felt invincible. By 22, we were married, promising forever, in a small church with our families cheering us on. Looking back, I wonder if I missed the signs even then, but in those days, all I saw was him. Our early years were a whirlwind. We moved to Chicago for Mark's law school, living in a shoebox apartment that smelled like old paint. I worked odd jobs, designing flyers for local bands while he studied late into the night. When Emily came along, everything changed. She was our miracle, with his blue eyes and my stubborn streak. I gave up my freelance gigs to stay home, pouring myself into motherhood. Jake followed 4 years later, and suddenly we were a family of 4, building a life I thought was bulletproof. Mark got hired at a big law firm, and we bought a house in the suburbs, complete with a swing set in the backyard and neighbors who waved every morning. Sunday barbecues, school plays, summer trips to the lake. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I believed in us. Mark's career took off, and I was proud. He'd come home with stories of courtroom wins, his tie loosened, a tired smile on his face. I'd listen, nodding while stirring pasta or folding laundry. Somewhere along the way, though, things shifted. He started staying late at the office, blaming big cases or demanding clients. I'd wait up, reheating dinner, telling myself it was temporary. He'd kiss my forehead, say he was sorry, and I'd believe him. I always believed him. When he stopped kissing my forehead, when his apologies turned into shrugs, I told myself it was just stress. Marriage is work, right? You don't walk away when things get hard. I think I first noticed Lisa at a company Christmas party 2 years ago. She was new, Mark's assistant, all polished smiles and sleek dresses. She had this way of lingering, laughing at his jokes a little too long, her hand brushing his arm when she passed him a drink. I remember feeling a pang, but I pushed it down. Not to me, not to us. She was just doing her job, I told myself, being friendly. But her name started popping up more. Lisa this, Lisa that. I'd see her texts light up his phone at night. Work stuff, he said. I trusted him, so I let it go. I'd spent 20 years building a life with this man. I wasn't going to let a fleeting doubt tear it apart. Looking back, the signs were there, piling up like unpaid bills. He stopped asking about my day. He'd snap when I asked about his. Our conversations dwindled to logistics, kids' schedules, grocery lists. I kept the house running, kept the kids fed and happy, kept our life together while he drifted further away. I'd catch him staring at his phone, a faint smile I didn't recognize. I'd ask what was funny, and he'd say nothing, just work. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. So I poured myself into being the perfect wife, the perfect mom, thinking if I tried harder, he'd come back to me. I didn't know he was already gone. The kids were my anchor. Emily, 16 now, was all fire and opinions, slamming doors when I asked about her day, but still crawling into my bed during thunderstorms. Jake, 12, was quieter, always tinkering with his model airplanes, his brow furrowed like his dad's when he concentrated. They were my reason for everything. I'd given up my design career for them, for us, believing Mark and I were a team. I didn't regret it, not really, but sometimes I'd find my old sketchbooks in the attic and feel a pang for the woman I used to be. I thought Mark saw her, even when I couldn't. I thought he loved her. That morning when I found the note, it all crashed down. The kids were at school, Emily probably texting her friends, Jake probably doodling in his notebook. They didn't know their world was about to break. I sat there, staring at the fridge, the note's words searing into me. I'm in love with Lisa. Lisa, with her perfect hair and her knowing smile. Lisa, who wasn't me. 20 years, and he'd chosen her. I felt like I was drowning, my chest tight, my hands cold. I wanted to scream, to call him, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. All I could do was sit there, the photo of our wedding day still in my hand, mocking me with its lies. How had I been so blind? How had I let our life slip through my fingers? And what was I supposed to do now, with a broken family and a heart that felt like it would never beat right again? The note was still in my hand, its edges creased from my grip, when the front door creaked open hours later. Emily's backpack thudded to the floor, her voice calling out for me. I stuffed the paper in my pocket, wiping my face, but she stopped short in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes, so much like Mark's, narrowed. Mom, what's wrong? I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Jake shuffled in behind her, headphones on, oblivious. I couldn't tell them, not yet. But the truth was a weight I couldn't carry alone, and it was crushing me. I called Mark that night, after the kids were in bed. My hands shook as I dialed, my heart pounding like it might break through my ribs. He answered on the third ring, his voice flat, distant. What do you want? I could barely breathe. How could you do this? To me, to the kids. He sighed, like I was an inconvenience. It's over. I'm with Lisa now. I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending. Pretending for years, and he called it pretending? I screamed at him, words I didn't know I had, about loyalty, about promises, about the life we built. He hung up. I threw the phone across the room, and it cracked against the wall. The house was silent again, but inside I was raging. I couldn't sit still. I needed answers, something to make sense of the hole in my chest. Against every shred of reason, I drove to Lisa's apartment the next day. I'd found her address in Mark's old work emails, from a time when I still thought I could trust him. It was a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel, nothing like our cozy suburban home. I banged on her door, my pulse roaring in my ears. When she opened it, her perfect hair and smug smile hit me like a slap. What do you want? She asked, like I was a nuisance. You know what I want, I spat. Why? Why him? Why us? She leaned against the doorframe, unbothered. Mark deserves better, someone who gets him. You had your chance. I wanted to lunge at her, to tear that smirk off her face, but my feet wouldn't move. I turned and left, her laughter echoing in my head as I stumbled back to my car. The kids were falling apart, and I couldn't stop it. Emily overheard me crying in the bathroom that night and stormed into my room, her face red. Why did Dad leave? Why weren't you enough, Mom? Her words cut deeper than Mark's note. I reached for her, but she yanked away, slamming her door. Jake was quieter, retreating into his room, his model airplanes untouched. I'd catch him staring out the window, waiting for a car that wasn't coming. I was failing them, just like I'd failed to keep Mark. The guilt was suffocating. I spiraled. Late at night, when the house was dark, I'd scroll through Lisa's social media, her post a parade of confidence and youth. Photos of her at fancy restaurants, her smile gleaming, her life untouched by the wreckage she'd caused. I compared myself, my stretch marks, my tired eyes, the lines on my face from years of worry and love. Had I let myself go? Was I too boring, too predictable? I'd given everything to Mark, to our family, and it wasn't enough. I stopped eating, barely slept. The mirror became my enemy, showing me a woman I didn't recognize. Sarah, my oldest friend, saw me unraveling. She showed up one morning with coffee and a fierce look in her eyes. "You can't let them do this to you," she said, grabbing my hands. "Mark made his choice, and Lisa's a vulture. But you're stronger than this. Fight for yourself, for Emily and Jake. They don't get to win." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the fog. I didn't want Mark back. Not anymore. But I wanted to understand. I needed to know why he'd thrown us away. I started digging. It began with small things, like checking our bank statements for clues. I found withdrawals I didn't recognize, hundreds of dollars at a time, draining our joint account. Then I went through Mark's old briefcase, the one he'd left in the garage. Tucked in a side pocket were receipts, crumpled and forgotten. Dinners at restaurants we never went to, hotel stays when he'd told me he was at conferences. One receipt had Lisa's name on it, her handwriting looping across the back, a heart dotting the I. My stomach churned. This wasn't just an affair. It was a double life. I kept going, driven by a mix of rage and desperation. I hacked into his old email account, the password still our anniversary date. There were messages to Lisa, dozens of them, going back years. Plans for trips, flirty banter, promises of a future. But there were other emails too. Ones he hadn't deleted, from clients at the firm. Vague references to offshore accounts and discrete transactions. Mark had always been ambitious, but this felt different. Darker. I didn't understand it all, but I knew it was wrong. And Lisa was in the middle of it, her name CC'd on emails she had no business seeing. The deeper I went, the angrier I got. They'd played me for a fool, both of them. Mark had lied to my face, and Lisa had waltzed into our lives, taking what wasn't hers. I wasn't sleeping anymore, but it wasn't despair keeping me awake now. It was fire. I thought about confronting them again, about exposing their lies to everyone, the firm, the kids, the world. But I needed more. I needed proof. Something undeniable that would make them feel the weight of what they'd done. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd found the note, surrounded by bank statements and scribbled notes. My hands were steady now, my tears long gone. Sarah's words echoed in my head. Fight for yourself. I wasn't the broken woman Mark left behind. I was something else, something stronger. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew I wasn't stopping. They thought they could erase me, rewrite our story like I didn't matter. They were wrong. I was going to make them pay. Not with screams or tears, but with the truth. And when I found it, they'd wish they'd never crossed me. The kitchen table had become my war room, littered with bank statements, receipts, and my frantic notes scrawled in the margins. I'd been digging for weeks, piecing together Mark and Lisa's betrayal like a puzzle I couldn't stop solving. My anger kept me sharp, but it was exhausting, a fire that burned hotter every day. Emily and Jake were still hurting, their questions about their dad unanswered, and I was barely holding us together. Yet every time I thought about giving up, I'd see Lisa's smirk in my mind, hear Mark's cold voice on the phone, and I'd keep going. I wasn't just fighting for answers anymore. I was fighting for me. It was a Thursday night, rain pounding the windows, when everything changed. I'd been combing through Mark's emails again, chasing threads about those shady client deals. My eyes were burning, my coffee cold, when a message popped up in my inbox. It was from Tom, one of Mark's coworkers at the firm, a guy I'd met maybe twice at company events. The subject line was blank, and the email was short. "You need to see this. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." Attached was a file labeled Backup. My heart thudded as I clicked it. A USB drive had been mailed to my house the next day. No return address, just Tom's initials scribbled on the package. I plugged it in, my hands trembling, not knowing what I'd find. The drive was a gold mine, and not the kind I expected. There were folders of documents, emails, even photos, all tied to Mark's work at the firm. At first, it looked like more of the same, vague references to offshore accounts, client names I didn't recognize. But then I found a subfolder labeled L. My stomach dropped. Inside were emails between Mark and Lisa. Not the flirty ones I'd seen before, but something else entirely. Lisa wasn't just his secretary or his mistress. She was blackmailing him. One email from her was chillingly clear. "Leave your wife, or I send these to the partners. You know what's at stake." Attached were photos, grainy but unmistakable, of Mark meeting with a client in a dimly lit bar, handing over an envelope. Another file had screenshots of emails detailing illegal wire transfers, the kind that could ruin a career and land someone in jail. I sat back, my breath shallow, the room spinning. Lisa didn't love Mark. She'd played him, used his secrets to trap him. The affair, the way she'd flaunted it, it was all a game to her. She'd seen his weaknesses, his greed, his ego, and she'd weaponized them. I'd thought I'd known pain when he left me, but this was different. It was betrayal layered on betrayal, a twisted knot of lies. Mark wasn't just a cheater. He was a coward, caught in her web, too spineless to fight back. And me? I'd been collateral damage. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the house, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Part of me wanted to call Mark, to scream at him for dragging our family into his mess. But I waited. I needed to be sure, needed to understand the full scope of what I'd found. By morning, I'd gone through every file. The evidence was damning. Lisa had been collecting dirt on Mark for over a year, threatening to expose his shady deals unless he paid her off and left me. The money from our joint account, the trips, the dinners, it wasn't love. It was extortion. She'd bled him dry, and he'd let her, choosing her over us to save his own skin. I had to see him. Not to beg or cry, but to know the truth. I texted him from a burner app, asking to meet at a diner outside town. He showed up looking like a ghost, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. I slid the USB drive across the table, my voice steady. "Tell me everything, or this goes to the firm." He stared at it, his face crumpling. For the first time, he didn't have an excuse. "She had me cornered," he whispered. "The deals, the money, it was supposed to be a one-time thing. But Lisa found out. She said she'd ruin me if I didn't do what she wanted. He admitted he'd never loved her, that he'd been too scared to fight back, too weak to tell me. I listened, my heart pounding. But I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choices. He'd let her destroy us. I walked out of the diner, the rain soaking my hair, and for the first time in months, I felt something like power. I held the key to their downfall. I could send the files to the firm, to the police even, and watch them both burn. Lisa's blackmail, Mark's corruption, it was all there, undeniable. But as I drove home, my kids' faces flashed in my mind. Emily's anger, Jake's silence, a public scandal would drag them through the mud, their dad's name splashed across headlines, their lives upended again. I gripped the steering wheel, torn. Did I ruin them, let the world see their lies, or did I protect what was left of my family? The choice felt like a blade in my chest. I decided to face Lisa one last time, not for revenge, but for me. I showed up at her apartment unannounced, the USB drive in my purse. She opened the door, her confidence faltering when she saw my face. "You thought you could break me," I said, my voice low, unyielding. "You thought you'd won." I didn't show her the files, didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me she knew I had something. "Whatever you think you've got, it's nothing," she snapped, but her voice shook. I stepped closer, my anger a quiet storm. "You're wrong, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when it's coming." I turned and left, her silence louder than any comeback she could have thrown. Driving home, I felt the weight lift, just a little. I wasn't the victim anymore. I'd seen their lies, their weaknesses, and I'd chosen my path, not for them, but for me, for Emily, for Jake. The USB drive was still in my purse, a weapon I could use or bury. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing, I was in control now. They'd tried to erase me, but I was still here, stronger than they'd ever know. And whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms. The rain had stopped by the time I left Lisa's apartment, the city lights blurring as I drove home. My hands were steady on the wheel, the USB drive still in my purse, its weight both a burden and a shield. I'd looked into Lisa's eyes and seen her falter, her smugness cracking under the truth I held. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one trembling. I'd reclaimed something she and Mark had tried to steal. My dignity, my strength. But as I pulled into my driveway, the quiet house waiting, I knew the fight wasn't over. My kids were inside, their world still fractured. And I had to decide what to do with the power I'd won. I didn't go to Lisa again, but I made sure she knew I wasn't bluffing. A week later, I mailed her a single printed email from the USB drive, one of her threats to Mark, with a note in my handwriting. "I have the rest. Stay away from my family." I didn't need to see her face to know she'd gotten the message. She quit the firm the next day, her social media accounts went dark, and I heard through a mutual friend she'd left town. Her silence was victory enough. She'd thought she could play us all, but she'd underestimated me. I didn't destroy her. Not because she deserved mercy, but because my kids didn't need their mother's name tied to her scandal. I'd won by letting her run scared. Mark's reckoning came harder. The firm launched an internal investigation after an anonymous tip about irregular client accounts. I didn't send the USB drive, but I'd dropped enough hints to Tom, his coworker, to point them in the right direction. Mark was fired within weeks, his reputation in tatters. He showed up at the house one night, unshaven, his eyes hollow, begging to talk. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm gonna come home." I stood in the doorway, Emily and Jake asleep upstairs, and felt nothing but cold clarity. "You don't have a home here anymore," I told him. "You chose her. You chose yourself. Live with it." He left, shoulders slumped, and I locked the door behind him. He'd built his own cage, and I wasn't the one holding the key. The kids were my focus now. Emily's anger had softened, but the hurt lingered. I got her into therapy, sitting through sessions with her when she asked, holding her hand when she cried about the dad she thought she knew. Jake was trickier, his silence a wall I couldn't break. One night, I found him in his room, staring at his model airplanes, their wings gathering dust. "Want to build one together?" I asked. He shrugged, but he handed me a glue stick and we worked side by side, the quiet between us gentle for the first time in months. When he smiled, small but real, I felt a piece of my heart stitch itself back together. They were healing, slowly. I was healing too, though it didn't feel like it some days. The betrayal had carved deep scars, but I was learning to live with them. I dug out my old sketchbooks, the ones I'd buried in the attic, and started drawing again. At first, it was just a way to fill the empty nights, but soon I was taking freelance design jobs, small projects that reminded me of the woman I'd been before Mark, before kids, before I'd let myself fade. I set up a website, my name bold across the top, and every new client felt like a brick in a new foundation. I wasn't just a wife or a mom anymore. I was me, and I was enough. The USB drive stayed in a locked drawer, a silent reminder of the truth I could unleash if I needed to. I didn't know if I'd ever use it, but it gave me peace. A kind of insurance against the past. Mark tried calling a few times, leaving voicemails about reconciliation, but I deleted them without listening. He wasn't my future. My future was Emily's laugh when we binge-watched old movies. Jake's excitement when his plane coming to life on my screen. My future was mine. Looking back, I realized betrayal didn't end me. It broke me open, forced me to rebuild from the ground up. The pain was still there, a quiet ache on lonely nights, but it wasn't all I was. I'd face Mark's lies, Lisa's schemes, and I'd come out stronger. I thought about the woman I'd been, sitting at that kitchen table, crushed by a note that tore her world apart. She felt so far away now. I'd fought for her, for my kids, for the life we deserved, and I'd won. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone's taken your trust and shattered it, know this: it doesn't define you. It's a wound, but it's not the end. You can fight for your story, rewrite it with your own hands. I did. I'm still here, scars and all, building a life that's mine. And if I can do it, so can you.